From the land of melting lakes, this is 10,000 Takes. Brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. And that is true again this week. We can go a lot of different directions out of the gate. But I think we'll start with the Minnesota Vikings.
Of course.
Yes, indeed. The NFL eclipses everything, even in March. But the Vikings have been active. Now, you don't win Super Bowls in March.
No.
But certainly a lot of their acquisitions on the O-line, the D-line, Jordan Mason, the running back, they get him in a deal from San Francisco. Most people giving them high grades.
I agree.
But what about this quarterback quandary they're still in? Aaron Rodgers, should they bring him in? Or should they say no? Now, at the time of this taping, everything was in flux. So what do you think?
Oh, boy. Thank you for that introduction. What do I think? Look, do I think Aaron Rodgers still has game? I'd say that's a safe bet. I think he still does. I mean, he had a pretty good game. His last game as a New York Jet was pretty good, actually. Is he a good fit here? I don't know. I'm not so sure. I mean, do you want to really bring that circus to town? Him with his $1 million a show to do the Pat McAfee show, and I don't know, him doing seances up in the hills in California with you.
I mean, darkness retreats in Oregon.
Yeah, what? Do you want all that weird? Is he going to show up, do the mini camps, do the training camp the way you're supposed to? Is he all in? If he's all in, and potentially he could be the backup, and that doesn't bother him, and you don't have to give him, the moon and the stars above salary-wise, okay. But I don't see any of that with Aaron Rodgers. He wants to go start, wants to play, wants to win a Super Bowl. That's what I think Aaron Rodgers, and he wants to get paid. And so none of those fit into this category for him, if you ask me.
So you're saying Aaron Rodgers does not check the boxes for the Minnesota Vikings, who, in my opinion, need to do something and bring in a quarterback. Maybe it's Jameis Winston, but as far as I'm concerned, what you brought up is it's all spot on. If Aaron were to come, he's got to look Kevin O'Connell in the eye. He's got to say, I'll be there at minicamp. I'll be there at OTAs. I'll spend my spare time throwing the rock to Jay Jets and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. And I'm going to, I'm going to sponge up everything that this organization can offer me. I'll be the ultimate team guy. I think if you're the Vikings and you want him, the pitch I would have if I'm KOC is, look, Aaron, look at all these toys you can play with. Maybe the best wideout in the NFL in Jefferson. You only have one ring, and that was Super Bowl 45. That was a long time ago with Green Bay. Why don't you get another ring and cement your legacy? When you get 2 rings, you're in rare air. Come to Minnesota, and also bring the Lombardi to Minnesota. It's never happened. So I'd throw the gauntlet out there. I'd say, come on down. Let's get it done. And be a mentor for J.J. McCarthy.
Well, and I think that is the key piece to this whole thing, being a mentor for J.J. McCarthy, because that's what they want out of this guy, right? They want him to be a mentor and, potentially maybe start the first handful of games and then have J.J. pick up the ball and run, because that's the guy that, potentially is your future. All right. That having been said, the other big quandary right now here in Minnesota sports, as we record this show, who is going to be the next men's basketball coach of your University of Minnesota Golden Gophers? Ben Johnson let go immediately after losing in the Big Ten conference tournament. And Niko Medved seems to be the name that we keep hearing. He with Colorado State, and he's done a lot of great things with Colorado State and working his way up to this point. You have any feelings on this? Do you have some hidden guy that we don't know about that they might name? What's your story here with the Gophers?
Oh, it's the U of M. They'll probably mess it up. First of all, what are the prerequisites? I hope it doesn't require a birth certificate that says you were born in Minnesota. I hope that's not what they're making sure.
I think Nico's got that.
He does have it,
okay.
And he's had success at Colorado State. 3 trips to the tournament, including this year. Not saying he's not qualified, but I hope that's not the primary reason why they're looking at Niko Medved, who midweek Colorado State was saying, well, I haven't heard their AD from Mark Coyle about talking to this guy. So we'll see. I think they need to make a splash hire, but beyond who they bring in, will they pay him? And then Mark Coyle, his hiring history has been checkered, I would say, here at Minnesota. What about Rebecca Cunningham, the president of the U of M?
Oh.
I'm going to throw the gauntlet down at her. Are you committed to getting Minnesota in the upper echelon of D1 sports? Because nobody ever has been in the past. Rebecca, are you different?
No, she's not.
Okay. Fair enough. That was an easy answer.
Yes, it was, and it is the answer. All right, we're going to talk some baseball coming up next.
We are 10K Takes, your MLB ticket.
When you see somebody who's a great skater, you can see in their individual rhythm. My name is Christian Grunna. I am owner, head coach, operator, main instructor for Grunna Power Skating. We had a history of not just speed skating, but auto racing in our family, so always interested in being fast. I want every player that comes my way to develop their skills, but also grow confidence in themselves as a human being.
In Lakeville, Minnesota, dozens of meeting venues are ready to host your next corporate event, banquet, and holiday party. Lakeville has unique conference facilities, a variety of hotels, an abundance of team-building options, and dining that are sure to impress. For suggestions that suit your needs, please call the Lakeville Convention and Visitors Bureau at 952-469-2020 or go to visitlakeville.org. Lakeville, we mean business.
Seeing clearly matters. Being seen matters more. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
We are 10,000 takes, and we are waiting on the start of this regular season. By the time this show airs next week, we'll be underway with the regular season. Hard to believe. It's March baseball now. It's not April.
And it technically started earlier this week in Tokyo.
Oh, that's true.
I was in the Dodgers.
Yeah, that's true, too. So let's head down to Fort Myers. Our guy, Bobby Nightengale, joining us. He is Star-Tribune beat reporter for the Minnesota Twins. Let's start out with the so-called elephant in the room, Royce Lewis, out at least for opening day after he pulled the hammy. We've seen it over and over again. Everybody's been talking about it for the last several days. How far down the schedule do you think this is going to have to go before he is back, and how severe is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a moderate hamstring strain. That's the diagnosis, but so far, no timetable. I mean, it's still pretty swollen. So it's going to take a little bit of time for the swelling to go down to before he can actually start doing things and the rehab process can begin. I would guess, I mean, you're looking at probably mid-April would be the most optimistic outcome, I think. The hamstrings, at least it's not like there's no tear in terms of that where it's fully torn. So not as probably severe as it was last year where he missed the first 2 months, but somewhere in between would be my guess between mid-April and he came back last year in June, so somewhere in between there.
You know, Royce, he's been star-crossed, Bobby. I mean, when he's been on the field, he's been brilliant, but he hasn't been on the field enough because of these injuries. You're around him. Does it bother him? He seems like such an upbeat guy, but does it take a toll on him mentally?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely one of those things that it's confusing for him. I mean, why is he getting hurt so much? He's still only 25 to 26 years old, and almost all of his injuries outside of he ran into the wall and tore his ACL when he played center field that one time have all been running the bases. And it's not something like growing up. He never was a guy that got hurt. Minor leagues, he really never got hurt. It really has just all popped up in the last few years, and I think that's the frustrating part for him is just. It's such a simple baseball play, running the bases, running to first base, running out a grounder in this latest scenario. And, he's frustrated. I mean, it's one of those, he knows how talented he is, how important he is to the team. And he wants to put together a full season to kind of see what he can do. And, it's another year where he's not going to be able to play a full season. So definitely frustration for him, as optimistic as he usually is. And he's hoping to be back as soon as possible. There's deep down, there's a lot of frustration in there.
Does that put Jose Miranda as your primary third baseman until he returns, or what do you think is going to happen?
I think that's probably the most likely outcome. Jose Miranda stepped up at third base when Royce was out last year. And you have to remember, I mean, Royce Lewis was probably going to bat fifth in this lineup regularly. And so you lose a big power bat in the middle of your lineup. Now, Jose Miranda's not that type of power. I think he only had one homer in like the last 3 or 4 months last year. But he's the guy that gets on base a ton. I mean, when he was before the All-Star break, I think he was hitting around 325, and then he kind of had a hip injury and slowed down the last few months. But he'll get the first crack at it, it appears. Brooks Lee will probably figure into that a little bit too, just his versatility, better defender. But I think just to make up the offense, I think Jose Miranda is at least going to get the first look.
Is there anybody down there at training camp, at spring training, that has caught your eye that maybe has been flying under the radar that you think, okay, this guy, whether it's a position player or a pitcher, might be able to make a name for himself?
I think the one that's turned the heads the most has been Zebby Matthews. Now he got cut. He's going to start at AAA St. Paul, but his stuff looks amazing compared to where it was at the end of last year. He had a great year last year, started the year in Class A ball, and got all the way to the major leagues for the end of the season, was pitching in some, games that mattered for them trying to make the playoffs. But his fastball's up to 97 miles an hour. He's throwing 94-mile-an-hour cutters. I mean, he just looks like a different guy, a lot more confident. Didn't give up a run all spring. Just kind of a numbers game. I mean, Simeon Woods Richardson's also having a great spring and deserved the last spot in the rotation. But I think Twins feel really good about their depth. I mean, in terms of, you have Simeon Woods Richardson, David Festa, Zebby Matthews, and improved Zebby Matthews. That's 7 starters in their rotation that they feel like they're comfortable going to at any time. And so if anyone struggles during the season, if there's an injury, wouldn't be shocked if Zebby Matthews gets an early call just based off the way he looked this spring.
So I think you already answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway. Lopez, Ryan, and Ober at the top of the rotation. The backside, then that's Paddock and who?
Simeon Woods Richardson.
It's Simeon Woods Richardson. Okay. Have they already sent the other guys down, or what's happening with those last couple of 2-3 guys you mentioned, Festa in particular?
Yeah, the rotation's set. It's going to be Pablo Lopez opening day, Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober will finish that series in St. Louis, and then Chris Paddock and Simeon Woods Richardson in order will start the first 2 games in Chicago. So that means Joe Ryan will get the home opener if there's no rainouts. And they said it pretty early. I mean, everyone's healthy. They're all pitching 4+ innings already. Pablo went 6 innings in his last spring training start, so full speed ahead for the rotation.
It seems like, Bobby, every year the Twins are injury prone. That's always part of the narrative with this team. Are they above the average in Major League Baseball for games missed by players, or is this just the way it is around the league? For me, it just seems like they can't get their core group on the field basically day in, day out.
Yeah, I think it's more just the core group as it stands out. I mean, if I was looking at it last year, they ranked like 11th in how the salary per injured list, days on the injured list. Carlos Correa didn't miss half the season last year. Byron Buxton's obviously been snake bitten. Royce Lewis has been injured. So, I mean, when you talk about those 3 guys in particular, the 3 best position players, I think it stands out. But relatively speaking, they were having a really healthy camp. I mean, Michael Tonkin was the only guy projected to start on the injured list before Royce Lewis. And you look at the New York Yankees and all the injuries they've had. I mean, Luis Gil and Garrett Cole are missing from their starting rotation. Giancarlo Stanton's going to be out for a long time with his elbow injury. You look at the Dodgers, they have some injuries that they're dealing with. Mookie Betts, missed the opening series because he lost 15 pounds because of an illness. So, there's injuries across baseball, particularly pitching injuries. So the Twins have been lucky in that regard. I just think it's the big names that everyone's looking at that have been dealing with the injuries for the Twins, and that's why it stands out so much.
Speaking of Carlos Correa, how has he looked this spring? Does he look like 100% or close to it? What's your observation on Correa?
Yeah, I'd say close to it. I mean, he's if you look at like the stats line, I think he's not hitting very well in camp in terms of just spring training games. He only has 4 or 5 hits, but he's crushing the ball. I mean, in terms of the ground outs he's had, the line outs he's had, hitting the ball 110 miles an hour. I've seen a few times. So that speaks to the way he's moving. And also in the field, he's looked fine defensively after 2 years in a row that he's dealt with plantar fasciitis in both of his feet. I mean, you can tell he's worked on it. You can tell he feels like he has it managed better. Doing some different things with his cleats as well. So he's in a good place. I mean, the hits just haven't shown up, but I feel like that's one of those. Once the season starts, he kind of times it up pretty well in terms of getting off to a start in April.
Bobby, you're in Fort Myers, a couple hours south of Tampa St. Pete. What's the future of the Tampa Bay Rays? Obviously, the hurricane ripped the roof off Tropicana Field. The new stadium appears to be gone, at least the hopes of getting one. Are the Rays long for Tampa St. Pete?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question down here. It's just kind of what's going to happen. Obviously, they're going to play in George Steinbrenner Field, the Yankees' high or low A affiliate this year. So they're going to play in a minor league stadium, and after that, no one really knows. I mean, do they fix Tropicana Field and spend all the money doing that, knowing they really don't want to play there more than a couple more years? You read reports that Rob Manfred, the commissioner, wants kind of new ownership, and that he's kind of frustrated with the Rays ownership as it is. Obviously, having a stadium deal lined up that took a long time to get there, and then the hurricane hits and some deadlines don't get met, and that falls apart. So, I think that's an open question. It's one of those. Rob Manfred, I think he's got 3 or 4 years left before he said he wants to retire. And expansion's a huge thing he wants to get off the ground. I mean, he wants expansion before he's done as commissioner, and that can't happen until this is resolved. So, not a surprise that there's some pressure on the Rays ownership to sell if you're not going to get a new stadium done. But that's kind of the big thing is now that the A's got settled last year, at least moving towards Vegas, it's one of those, if you want expansion, this has to get done immediately. And right now everything's up in the air.
All right, quickly, final question for you. As we speak, as we do this interview, are the Twins, other than Royce Lewis, we already discussed, are the Twins healthy when they come north?
Yeah, they are. I mean, Byron Buxton looks great. He's been stealing bases, running extremely well. So that's been an encouraging sign. All their starting pitchers, including Joe Ryan, who missed last year, has been healthy. And then the bullpen, Brock Stewart's been relatively healthy too. So just encouraging the guys that ended the last season on the injured list, are doing well starting the spring.
All right, Bobby, appreciate the time and the update from Fort Myers. I'm sure we'll be checking in with you as they head into the regular season and hopefully an entertaining season of baseball ahead for us.
Yeah, it's finally here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bobby.
Amazingly, it is. He is Bobby Nightengale. He is the Twins beat writer for the Minnesota Star-Tribune, joining us here on 10,000 Takes. Back with more after this timeout. Stay with us.
Dream jobs can feel out of reach when reading is a challenge.
Reading out loud, literacy will literally make sense of the things you see. Reading out loud, literacy will literally make sense of the things you see. Minnesota is approaching.
According to literacyactionnetwork.org, Minnesota is approaching a worker shortage due to an aging and retiring workforce and the growing skill needs of employers resulting from globalization and technological change. As it stands, Minnesota's adult workforce will not be able to accommodate the employee needs of employers. Nearly 1 in 5 Minnesotans over age 25 do not have a high school diploma, and many who do still lack the basic skills necessary for employment. Learning to read is fun and essential. Reading Out Loud Literacy is sponsored by City of Minneapolis Community Trauma Response Fund.
Wally and Eric from 10,000 Takes here in the land of lakes. And if you want sports of all sorts, check us out. We cover all the bases, all the teams in the great state of Minnesota.
Vikings, Twins, Wild, Gophers, Timberwolves, Loons, you name it, we do it. Late night Saturday night on Fox 9 Plus and on the Fox local app.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring.
Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision. It's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Welcome back. Well, I know it's all about, filling out NCAA brackets for just about everybody this time of year. But let's talk about the March Madness that is the end of this regular season for the Wild and the Timberwolves. And what the expectations are, maybe of the Minnesota fan base of these two franchises, that they seem to be mired in mediocrity. Is that fair to say? The Timberwolves, for the longest time, had one of the worst records overall in the history of sports, right? I mean, from the time they started until the last...
Biggest losers of all time. You called them the bloat.
The bloat. Yeah. Biggest losers of all time. But they have reversed course on that and have played fairly well again this year, but maybe not well enough to supersede what they did last year. So my question is, what are the expectations? How low is the bar right now for the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Wild and their fan base?
It's about as low as that curb in your posh suburban neighborhood that you call home. I don't think the expectations are too high because this is Minnesota.
Right.
The fans have an Eeyore complex. They expect the worst. But I think let's start with the Wild. Fast beginning to the season. They've dovetailed a bit.
Yes.
They're in the middle of a long homestand. But if you look at the history of the Wild, only once have they gone to the Western Conference Finals. Mm-hmm. Everything else has either been one and done, two and done, or like last season, missed the playoffs. Mm-hmm. In the NHL, we've seen it with a number of teams. You can be a low seed and go on a deep run, maybe even win the cup. So I think it's time to up the ante. The Wild have been playing since Y2K, 25 years ago. They've been in the league a long time. It's time for the Minnesota Wild to be that surprise team in the playoffs. Now, without Kirill, though, is that a realistic expectation? I would say no. So probably the best you can hope for is winning one series, getting into round two, and stealing that one. But that would create a lot of buzz here, as you know.
Well, that'd be huge here.
There'd be parades.
Yeah. There would be a parade over on West 7th Street over there in St. Paul. All right, let's slide over to the Timberwolves. What are the expectations? Because coming into this season, the expectations had to be huge, right? Until you traded Karl Anthony Towns, and then the season got off to a relatively slow start while Cat was eating up the Eastern Conference. The Knicks have taken a step back or two. Cat is still having a very good year.
I see Tracy Morgan's vomiting at their games now.
Okay.
Luckily, he's okay.
I did not know that. But where are you on the Timberwolves briefly?
Yeah, I'll say this. They've never been to the NBA Finals, let alone win the title in their history, and they go back to 1989. They've only been to the Western Conference Finals twice. That's where they were a year ago. They knocked on the door of getting to the championship round, and so I would have thought this year the goal is finish it up and get to the finals and maybe win that coveted title. So I believe that has to be the goal for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I don't like the Cat deal, but my goodness, if they go on a run and get to the finals, I'll be the first guy to say, I was wrong, Tim Conley. You made a great trade. But if they go one and done, two and done, I call that a season that did not live up to potential.
Yeah, for sure. Another dumpster fire. All right. Stay with us. Speaking of dumpster fires, we're going to hear his take of the day.
Oh, boy.
That's coming up next. We are Minnesota Scores 10,000 Takes.
Seeing clearly matters. Being seen matters more. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
When you see somebody who's a great skater, you can see their individual rhythm. My name is Christian Grana. I'm owner, head coach, operator, main instructor for Grana Power Skating. We had a history of not just speed skating, but auto racing in our family, so we're always interested in being fast. I want every player that comes my way to develop their skills, but also grow confidence in themselves as a human being.
In Lakeville, Minnesota, Minnesota, dozens of meeting venues are ready to host your next corporate event, banquet, and holiday party. Lakeville has unique conference facilities, a variety of hotels, an abundance of team-building options, and dining that are sure to impress. For suggestions that suit your needs, please call the Lakeville Convention and Visitors Bureau at 952-469-2020 or go to visitlakeville.org. Lakeville, we mean business.
Reading out loud, literacy will literally make sense of the things you see. Reading out loud, literacy will literally make sense of the things you see.
British A. Robinson, President and CEO of the Barbara Bush Foundation, stated, "America's low literacy crisis is largely ignored, historically underfunded and woefully under-researched, despite being one of the great solvable problems of our time. Learning to read is fun and essential." Reading Out Loud Literacy is sponsored by City of Minneapolis Community Trauma Response Fund.
10K Takes on television as we wrap up yet another episode. Give a shout out to the viewers in the Twin Ports and the Twin Cities up and down that I-35 corridor. Now time for Takes of the Day. And
Yes.
Usually in your case, it's the wine hour. Angry American, Grumpy Guardian, Happy Camper, what are you this week?
Come on, be nice. I was happy the last 2 weeks. You think you're going to get 3 in a row? Not so much.
Not likely.
Okay, so it's this time of year, all the high school tournaments going on. Boys State basketball tournament. I watched the quarterfinals in Class 4A on Tuesday, and we didn't have a close game. The closest game was a 9-point game by the second seed, Wayzata. And we get this year after year after year after year. We had a couple of blowouts, and we had another game that was so-so. Apparently, the board of directors of Minnesota State High School League, they don't want competitive games at the state tournament. We don't want the best 8 teams or the teams that are playing the best at state tournament time to make it down to Target Center and make it onto television to be able to show what they've been doing all season long. No, we have to have this so-called regional representation, even though 90% of the schools, this goes for girls and boys basketball, in Class 4A are all in the metro area. You got about 10% outside of the metro. It's time to change the formula. Let's move on from this regional representation and do like you do. You allow it in football. Why do you not allow it in basketball? What's the prejudice against the game of basketball? You allow it so that there's cross sections. Let the two teams that are in the section championship from the 8 sections, let them go now into a group of 16 and seed that, and then let those 8 get to the state tournament. I got a million suggestions, but one of my suggestion is right now, don't do it this way anymore because you are ruining the state tournament again and again and again.
And let's check that mood meter.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, the Angry American. Again and again and again. All right, well, my take of the day, I'll go off the sports grid a bit here.
I'm sure.
I've, in my career or in my travels, I've had the chance to see the ruins of 9/11 a couple months after that happened in New York City. I was covering the George Floyd riots a few years ago for a radio station. And a few days ago, I was out in SoCal, took a drive to Altadena, which is north of Pasadena, nestled against the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, the same ones you see when you watch the Rose Bowl, and the Eaton fire. And boy, catastrophic. It was so powerful to see this up close. And my heart goes out to those people who lost their houses. 17 people never came back. There are some people that were missing. 9,000 buildings destroyed, and it really was a horrible tragedy. And they're still looking for any kind of donations if you want to help out. Plenty of good organizations out there in SoCal, food banks, Red Cross, etc. On that note, we got to go, and so much has happened today. I want to say thank you for watching. This is 10K Takes.